A desperate midnight call led her to a remote farm. It was supposed to be just another animal birth, until the farmer shared an ancestral secret, one modern medicine rejected, but that would change her life in a way everyone said was impossible at 45. The phone rang at 3 in the morning, cutting through the silence like a knife through Sarah Mitchell's chest. Lightning split the sky outside her small clinic, and she knew before answering that someone's world was about to change forever. What she didn't know was that it would be hers. "Doc, you need to get here now." Jake Harrison's voice crackled through the storm's static. "It's Moonbeam. She's been laboring for 6 hours and something's wrong. Real wrong." Sarah threw on her rain jacket, grabbed her emergency kit, and drove through sheets of rain toward the Harrison ranch. At 45, she'd delivered hundreds of foals, but tonight felt different. The storm had been battering their small Colorado community for 3 days straight, as if the heavens themselves were angry about something. Jake met her at the barn door, his weathered face etched with worry. At 50, he was the most respected rancher in the valley, known for his integrity and his uncanny ability to heal animals using methods passed down through generations. His wife had died 5 years ago from complications that no doctor could explain, and since then, he'd thrown himself into preserving the old ways his grandmother had taught him. "She's been pushing, but the foal's not positioned right," Jake said, leading her to the stall where Moonbeam, his prize Arabian mare, lay on her side. "I've tried everything I know, but..." Sarah knelt beside the mare, her trained hands assessing the situation. The foal was breached, and time was running out. For the next 4 hours, she worked alongside Jake, their hands moving in practiced synchronization. They barely spoke, but something passed between them in that barn, an understanding that went beyond words. When the foal finally slipped into the world, healthy and perfect, Sarah felt tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. But it wasn't just relief. It was something deeper, something that had been buried for 20 years. "Coffee?" Jake offered as they cleaned up. In his kitchen, warmed by the wood stove, Sarah found herself really looking at Jake for the first time. They'd worked together for 3 years, but always professionally. Tonight, exhaustion had stripped away their usual boundaries. "You ever wonder about the paths not taken?" Jake asked quietly, handing her a steaming mug. Sarah's throat tightened. "Every single day. My grandmother used to say that sometimes the universe keeps secrets from us until we're strong enough to handle the truth." Something in his tone made her look up. "What kind of secrets?" Jake hesitated, then walked to an old wooden chest in the corner. He pulled out a leather-bound journal, yellowed with age. "My grandmother was what folks around here called a healing woman. She helped people when regular doctors couldn't. Especially women who'd been told they couldn't have children." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "Jake, I know about your situation," he said gently. "Small town. People talk, but they don't know what I know." Sarah had been 17 when the doctors in Denver delivered their verdict. Severe endometriosis, they'd said. Scarring too extensive. The chance of conception was essentially 0. She'd built her entire adult life around that diagnosis, pouring her maternal instincts into caring for animals instead of the children she'd never have. "My grandmother's journal contains recipes," Jake continued. "Herbal treatments that worked when nothing else would. I've been afraid to share them because people nowadays, they want scientific proof for everything. Do you blame them?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "No, but I've seen things. Moonbeam out there? She was barren for 3 years. The vet in Durango said she'd never foal again. I gave her my grandmother's treatment for 6 months, and now look at her." Sarah stared at the journal as if it might bite her. "You're talking about horses, Jake, not people. I'm talking about life finding a way when everything else says it's impossible." The storm outside seemed to pause, waiting for her answer. Sarah thought about the empty rooms in her house, the baby clothes she'd secretly bought and hidden away, the dreams that visited her in the darkest hours of night. What would it involve? Jake opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with his grandmother's careful handwriting, pressed flowers, and detailed instructions. It's not simple. 3 different herb combinations, taken at specific times during your cycle. You'd need to follow it exactly for at least 6 months. And you think it would work? "I think my grandmother helped 14 women in this valley have babies when doctors said it was impossible, I think sometimes old wisdom knows things that modern science hasn't figured out yet. Sarah's hands trembled as she touched the journal. Why are you offering this to me? Jake's eyes met hers, and she saw pain there that mirrored her own. Because watching you with those animals, seeing how gentle you are, how much love you have to give, it seems like a waste that you can't share that with a child of your own. And if it doesn't work, then you'll be exactly where you are now. But if it does... Sarah closed her eyes. She thought about her empty house, her lonely dinners, the way her heart broke a little every time she saw a mother with her baby. I need time to think. Of course. But Sarah, Jake's voice stopped her at the door. My grandmother always said that some gifts come disguised as impossible things. Sometimes the biggest leap of faith brings the greatest rewards. Driving home through the breaking dawn, Sarah's mind raced. Could she dare to hope again? Could she risk the devastating disappointment if it didn't work? But more unsettling was the way Jake had looked at her in that kitchen, as if he was offering more than just an herbal remedy. Over the next week, Sarah found herself drawn back to the Harrison ranch for reasons that had nothing to do with veterinary calls. She'd catch herself making excuses to drive past his property, hoping to glimpse him working in the fields. On Thursday, she finally worked up the courage to knock on his door. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, but Jake held up a hand. Before you decide, there's something else you need to know. Something I should have told you that night. Sarah's stomach dropped. What? The herbs have to be grown in this specific soil. They won't work if they're grown anywhere else. We've tested it. There's something unique about the mineral content in this valley that makes the treatment effective. So if this works for you, if other women want to try it, they'd have to come here, to me, and there are people who wouldn't like that kind of attention. Sarah frowned. What kind of people? The kind who make money off people staying sick. The kind who don't like it when old remedies prove more effective than expensive treatments. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Are you saying this could be dangerous? I'm saying that change always threatens someone's status quo. My grandmother kept her practices quiet for good reason. Sarah stared at him, weighing the implications. And you're willing to take that risk? For the right person, yes. The way he said it made her pulse quicken. Jake, I need to ask you something directly. Is this just about helping me have a baby? Or is there something else happening here? Jake's jaw tightened. I buried my wife 5 years ago, Sarah. I thought that part of my life was over. But watching you that night in the barn, seeing your strength and compassion, maybe my grandmother was right about paths we haven't taken yet. Sarah's breath caught. I can't deal with complications right now. If I'm going to try this treatment, I need to focus completely on that. I understand, but I also can't pretend I don't feel something when I look at you. Before Sarah could respond, a truck pulled into the driveway. A young woman climbed out, her expensive clothes and pristine appearance marking her as an outsider. Are you Dr. Mitchell? The woman asked, approaching them with determined strides. I'm Emma Rodriguez, investigative journalist from Denver. I'm working on a story about alternative fertility treatments in rural communities. Sarah and Jake exchanged glances. I'm not sure I know what you're talking about, Sarah said carefully. Oh, I think you do. I've been tracking some very interesting birth statistics in this valley. Women who were supposedly infertile suddenly having babies. I think there's a story here, and I think you two are at the center of it. Sarah's blood ran cold. I haven't helped anyone get pregnant. I'm a veterinarian. But Mr. Harrison here comes from a family known for their unconventional healing methods, and you've been spending a lot of time at his ranch lately. Jake stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Miss Rodriguez, I think you're mistaken about whatever story you think you've found here. Am I? Because I've already talked to 3 women in town who swear that herbal treatments from this ranch helped them conceive after years of infertility. Women who are now willing to go on record. Sarah felt the world tilting beneath her feet. 3 women. She looked at Jake, who had gone pale. I think you should leave, Jake said quietly. Oh, I don't think so. In fact, I think this story is bigger than you realize. I've done some research into the land ownership in this valley, and it turns out there's been some very interesting activity from pharmaceutical companies lately. Seems like someone else has noticed your little miracle cures. The journalist smiled coldly. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about these treatments, or I'm going to write this story anyway, and it won't be nearly as flattering as it could be." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Everything was falling apart before it had even begun, but Jake's next words surprised her. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I think it's time you knew the truth about why I really wanted to help you." The journalist's eyes lit up with interest, and Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. What other secrets was Jake keeping? And why did she suddenly feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to discover just how far the fall might be? Jake's words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The journalist, Emma Rodriguez, pulled out her phone, ready to record whatever bombshell was about to drop. "The truth is," Jake said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his eyes, "Sarah isn't the first woman I've wanted to help. She's the third." Emma's finger hovered over the record button. "Third what?" "Third woman I've fallen in love with who couldn't have children." The confession hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stepped backward, shaking her head. "Jake, don't do this. Not in front of her. My first wife, Rebecca, we tried for 8 years. The herbs worked for her, but she died in childbirth. The baby didn't make it either." Jake's voice cracked. "After that, I swore I'd never give those herbs to another woman I cared about. Too dangerous." Emma lowered her phone slightly, caught off guard by the raw emotion in Jake's voice. "Then Maria Santos came to me 2 years ago. She'd been trying to get pregnant for 6 years. I gave her the herbs, told myself it was just helping a neighbor, but somewhere along the way I started caring about her too much." Jake's hands clenched at his sides. "She got pregnant. Healthy baby boy. But she fell in love with someone else during the pregnancy. Someone who could give her the family she deserved without all the complications I carry." Sarah's throat tightened. She'd known Maria, had seen her with her baby at the grocery store just last month, glowing with happiness. "So you see, Miss Rodriguez," Jake continued, "I'm not some benevolent healer. I'm a man who keeps making the same mistake over and over. I fall for women who need something I can give them, and I convince myself it's about helping them when really, I'm just trying to fill the hole my wife left behind." Emma stared at him, clearly not expecting such brutal honesty. "But the herbs work." "They work. But at what cost? Rebecca died. Maria left. And now I'm about to destroy Sarah's chance at happiness because I can't keep my feelings out of it." Sarah found her voice. "That's not your decision to make." Jake turned to her, his eyes filled with anguish. "Isn't it? The moment I offered you those herbs, I compromised everything. You should have gotten this offer from someone who could be objective, who wouldn't complicate things with his own needs. You think I'm that fragile?" Sarah stepped closer, anger flaring in her chest. "You think I can't handle complexity? I'm 45 years old, Jake. I've been dealing with impossible situations my entire adult life." Emma cleared her throat. "This is all very touching, but I still have questions about these treatments. Are they regulated? Tested? What happens when the FDA finds out?" "They already know," a new voice said from behind them. All three turned to see Dr. Patricia Wells, Sarah's former colleague from veterinary school, climbing out of a black SUV. Patricia now worked for a major pharmaceutical company, and her appearance here couldn't be coincidental. "Patricia?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Damage control," Patricia replied, her expression grim. "Sarah, we need to talk, privately." "I don't think so," Emma interjected. "This is getting more interesting by the minute." Patricia's cold gaze swept over the journalist. "Miss Rodriguez, isn't it? I believe you've been asking questions about herbal fertility treatments. I'm here to offer you a much bigger story." "What kind of story?" "The kind that involves corporate espionage, stolen intellectual property, and a conspiracy that goes back 3 generations. Patricia's smile was razor sharp. "Interested?" Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet again. "Patricia, what are you talking about? Your friend, Mr. Harrison, isn't the only one who knows about his grandmother's recipes. My company has been tracking the unusual birth rates in this valley for 2 years. We've identified the herbs, analyzed the soil composition, and we're very close to synthesizing the active compounds." Jake's face went white. "You can't do that. Those recipes belong to my family." "Actually, they don't. Not legally. Folk remedies can't be patented if they're already in public use. And according to our research, At least 14 women have used these treatments successfully over the past 30 years. Sarah's mind reeled. 14 women? Jake, you said your grandmother helped 14 women. She did, but I thought they'd all kept it secret. Patricia laughed coldly. Small towns don't keep secrets well. We found 12 of them, plus the 3 recent cases, all documented, all willing to testify about the effectiveness of the treatments. Emma was frantically taking notes. So what's the conspiracy? The conspiracy, Miss Rodriguez, is that my company has been quietly purchasing land around this valley for 18 months. We identified the specific mineral composition that makes the herbs effective, and we've been buying up properties to control the source. Sarah stared at Patricia in horror. You're going to destroy this place. We're going to modernize it, turn this valley into a research facility, create standardized treatments that can help thousands of women instead of just a few lucky enough to live in the middle of nowhere. What about the people who live here? Jake demanded. They'll be compensated fairly. Most of them will make more money selling their properties than they would in 10 years of ranching. Sarah felt sick. And if they don't want to sell? Patricia's expression hardened. There are ways to encourage cooperation, environmental regulations, zoning changes, tax assessments. Rural communities are surprisingly vulnerable to pressure when it's applied correctly. You're talking about destroying people's lives, Sarah said. I'm talking about saving lives. Do you know how many women suffer from infertility? How much money they spend on treatments that fail? We could help millions of women instead of dozens. Emma looked up from her notes. What's your company's timeline for this takeover? 6 months. We're already in negotiations with most of the major property owners. Mr. Harrison here is actually our final holdout. Sarah turned to Jake, seeing the truth in his face. That's why you offered me the herbs now. You knew this was coming. Jake nodded miserably. I wanted to help at least one more person before they shut me down. I thought maybe if we could document another success story, if we could prove the treatments work. You thought you could fight them? I thought maybe together we could find a way. Patricia stepped forward. Actually, there might be a way to make this work for everyone. Sarah's pulse quickened. What do you mean? My company would be willing to hire you, Sarah, as a consultant. You'd oversee the clinical trials, help us develop protocols that honor the traditional methods while meeting modern safety standards. And Jake? Mr. Harrison could maintain a small plot of land for ceremonial purposes. We understand the cultural significance of these traditions. Ceremonial purposes. Jake's voice was dangerous. These aren't party tricks, Patricia. This is healing. And healing requires regulation, testing, quality control. You can't just hand out herbal remedies and hope for the best. What if something goes wrong? What if someone has an allergic reaction? What if the herbs interact with other medications? Sarah realized Patricia was right about the dangers, but something about the corporate takeover felt wrong. What happens to the community? The community adapts. Change is never easy, but it's necessary for progress. Emma cleared her throat. This would make an incredible story. David versus Goliath, traditional healing versus corporate medicine, a love story caught in the middle. It's not a love story, Sarah said quickly. Isn't it? Emma's eyes sparkled with interest. The veterinarian who can't have children, the rancher who's lost everyone he's ever loved, the pharmaceutical company that wants to steal their miracle cure. It's got everything. Patricia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression grew more serious. That was my supervisor. Sarah, I need an answer today. Are you willing to work with us, or are you going to stand in the way of progress? She needs time to think, Jake said. Time is the one thing we don't have. Our legal team is filing papers tomorrow to begin eminent domain proceedings. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're doing it. Sarah felt trapped between impossible choices. Work with the pharmaceutical company and betray Jake's family heritage, or watch helplessly as they destroyed the community anyway. There's something else you should know, Patricia continued. We've been monitoring your health records, Sarah. The company knows about your infertility diagnosis. We also know you haven't tried the herbal treatment yet. Sarah's blood ran cold. How do you know that? We know because we've been testing the women who did use the treatments. Their blood chemistry shows specific markers that indicate exposure to the herbs. You don't have those markers. Jake stepped protectively closer to Sarah. You've been testing people without their knowledge? We've been testing public water supplies, soil samples, and running background health screens on willing participants. All perfectly legal. Willing participants? Patricia smiled. The women were told they were participating in a general health survey for rural populations. They signed consent forms. Emma whistled low. That's definitely illegal. Actually, it's not. The consent forms were very carefully worded. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. So you know I haven't tried the treatment. You know it works on other women and you want me to help you steal it. I want you to help me make it available to everyone who needs it, not just a chosen few. By destroying this community. By evolving beyond it. Jake's jaw tightened. Sarah, whatever you decide, I'll support you. But there's one more thing you should know before you choose. Patricia's eyes narrowed. What now? The herbs don't just help with fertility. They have other properties, regenerative properties that could help with dozens of medical conditions. My grandmother's journal contains treatments for arthritis, chronic pain, autoimmune disorders. Sarah stared at him. You didn't tell me that. I didn't want to overwhelm you. But if Patricia's company gets control of this land, they'll have access to treatments that could change medicine forever. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing naked greed. You're bluffing. Am I? Sarah, remember Moonbeam's previous owner? Old Pete Morrison? He had arthritis so bad he could barely walk. I gave him a tea made from the same herbs, different preparation. He's been pain-free for 6 months. Emma's eyes widened. This isn't just about fertility treatments. This is about a potential medical revolution, which is exactly why it needs to be properly researched and regulated, Patricia snapped. You can't have untrained people dispensing treatments for serious medical conditions. Untrained? Jake's voice was deadly quiet. My grandmother studied with native healers, European herbalists, and learned from trial and success over 40 years. What training does your company have in traditional medicine? We have scientists, researchers, people with actual medical degrees, like the ones who told Sarah she could never have children? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah looked between them, realizing she was standing at a crossroads that would determine not just her own future, but the fate of an entire way of life. Patricia's phone buzzed again. She answered it, her face growing more tense with each word. Yes, sir, I understand. No, I don't think that will be necessary. She hung up and looked at Sarah with new urgency. That was my CEO. The timeline has moved up. We need your decision now, Sarah. Work with us, and you'll have access to treatments that could give you the child you've always wanted, plus a salary that would set you up for life. Refuse and watch us take everything anyway. Sarah felt Jake's hand brush against hers, offering support without pressure. Emma held her breath, pen poised over her notepad. The weight of the moment pressed down on Sarah's shoulders like a physical thing. I need to know something first, Sarah said slowly. Patricia, if your company synthesizes these compounds, makes them available worldwide, what guarantee do I have that you'll honor the traditional knowledge that made this possible? You have my word. Your word isn't worth much if you're willing to lie to research subjects and manipulate communities. Patricia's facade cracked completely. Sarah, you have 1 minute to decide. Work with us, or we'll make sure you never practice veterinary medicine in this state again. We have connections with licensing boards, insurance companies, professional organizations. The threat was clear, and Sarah felt her world narrowing to a single point of decision. But Jake's next words changed everything. Actually, Patricia, there's one thing your company doesn't know. Something that's going to make all your plans very difficult. Patricia's eyes flashed with suspicion. What? Jake smiled for the first time all day, and Sarah saw something dangerous in his expression. The herbs won't grow just anywhere in this valley. They only grow on my specific property. The mineral composition you're so interested in comes from a very small area that just happens to be directly under my house. That's impossible, is it? Sarah, remember I told you we'd tested growing them elsewhere? Even 50 yards away from the house, they lose their potency. The active compounds develop only in the soil within a 100-foot radius of my grandmother's original garden. Sarah's heart raced as she understood the implications. If Jake was telling the truth, his property wasn't just valuable to the pharmaceutical company, it was irreplaceable. Patricia's face had gone ashen. You're lying. Am I? Your own soil samples should confirm it. Unless your company has been less thorough than they claimed. From Patricia's expression, Sarah realized Jake had just checkmated the pharmaceutical giant, but she also knew that cornered corporations could be even more dangerous than confident ones. "What do you want?" Patricia asked quietly. Jake's smile widened, and Sarah held her breath, waiting to discover what price he was about to name for the miracle growing in his grandmother's garden. Jake's silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Patricia shifted nervously, her corporate confidence crumbling as she realized the balance of power had shifted completely. Emma's pen hovered over her notepad, sensing that the next few minutes would determine the entire story's direction. "What I want," Jake said finally, "is very simple. Sarah gets to try the treatment. If it works, if she gets pregnant and has a healthy baby, then we negotiate. If it doesn't work, your company can have everything except the house and the immediate garden area." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "And if it does work, then Sarah becomes a partner in whatever comes next. Not an employee, a partner, with full decision-making power over how the treatments are developed and distributed." Sarah's breath caught. "Jake, I haven't even decided if I want to try the treatment yet. But you do want to try it," he said gently. "I can see it in your eyes. The question isn't whether you want it. The question is whether you trust me enough to let me help you." Patricia stepped forward aggressively. "This is ridiculous. You're talking about gambling $1 billion medical breakthrough on one woman's pregnancy attempt. I'm talking about proving that the old ways work before we let corporate medicine destroy them." Emma looked up from her notes. "What's the timeline for this test?" 6 months, Jake replied. "If Sarah isn't pregnant by then, the company gets what it wants. And if she is pregnant, then we prove that some things can't be bought, only earned through trust and respect." Sarah stared at Jake, realizing that he was offering her more than just a chance at motherhood. He was offering her a chance to save an entire way of life, but the weight of that responsibility felt crushing. "Patricia," Sarah said slowly, "give me your company's guarantee. If I try this treatment and it doesn't work, you'll leave Jake enough land to live on and tend his grandmother's garden. Deal. And if it does work, you'll negotiate in good faith for a partnership that honors the traditional knowledge." Patricia hesitated. "I'll need approval from my supervisors." "Get it." While Patricia made her phone calls, Emma turned to Sarah. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. Why is having a baby so important to you? You've built a successful career. You're respected in the community. You have a good life." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Jake check on Moonbeam and her new foal in the barn. "Have you ever felt like there was a piece of yourself missing? Like you were living half a life?" "I think everyone feels that way sometimes. For me, it's been 28 years of feeling incomplete. Every time I deliver a calf or help a mare through a difficult birth, I'm reminded of what I can't have. Every baby shower invitation, every pregnancy announcement, every time someone complains about their children." Sarah's voice cracked. "I smile and nod and pretend it doesn't matter, but it does. It matters so much that sometimes I can barely breathe." Emma's expression softened. "And you think having a baby would fix that?" "I think having the chance to try would help me make peace with whatever happens. Right now, I'm frozen in the space between impossible and never tried." Jake returned from the barn, his face serious. "Sarah, before you decide anything, there's something else you need to know about the treatment." Sarah's heart sank. "What now?" "The herbs aren't just medicine. They're demanding. They require complete commitment. You can't drink alcohol, can't take any other medications, can't even drink coffee. You have to follow a very specific diet, sleep schedule, even emotional state." Emotional state. My grandmother believed that fertility wasn't just physical. She said the herbs only worked when a woman was ready to receive new life with her whole being. That means letting go of anger, fear, resentment, all of it. Sarah laughed bitterly. "So I have to achieve enlightenment to get pregnant. You have to be willing to change everything about how you live." Patricia finished her call and rejoined them. "My company agrees to the terms, with one addition. If the treatment works, we want to document everything. Full medical monitoring, regular testing, complete records." "Absolutely not," Jake said immediately. "This isn't a clinical trial. This is a woman trying to have a baby. Without documentation, there's no proof the treatment actually worked. Sarah could get pregnant naturally, and we'd have no way to prove the herbs made the difference. Sarah realized Patricia was right, but the idea of being studied like a lab rat made her skin crawl. What kind of monitoring? Blood work every 2 weeks, ultrasounds, dietary logs, symptom tracking, standard fertility treatment protocols. Jake shook his head. The minute you turn this into a medical experiment, you change the entire dynamic. My grandmother's methods worked because they treated the whole person, not just the reproductive system. Then how do we prove causation? Sarah had an idea. What if we compromise? I'll do the monitoring, but only with doctors I choose, and the results don't get shared with your company until after the baby is born, if there is a baby. Patricia considered this. Acceptable. But I want regular updates on your progress. Once a month through Jake, not directly from me. Deal. Emma looked between them all. So, what happens now? Jake turned to Sarah. Now, Sarah decides if she's willing to bet everything on an impossible dream. The weight of the moment settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. She thought about her empty house, her broken dreams, the corporate vultures circling Jake's land. She thought about the women who had come before her, trusting in ancient wisdom when modern medicine had failed them. I need to ask you something, Jake, and I need you to be completely honest. Always. Do you care about me, or do you just need someone to fight this battle with you? Jake's face went very still. That's a fair question. He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. I care about you, Sarah. More than I've cared about anyone since Rebecca died. But you're right to wonder about my motives. I can't separate my feelings for you from my need to preserve my family's legacy. At least you're honest. But here's what I can tell you with certainty. Whether you try the treatment or not, whether it works or not, whether we end up together or not, I will never regret offering you this chance. Because watching you with animals, seeing the gentleness in your hands, the love in your eyes, you were meant to be a mother, Sarah. And if there's any way to make that happen, any chance at all, then we have to try. Sarah felt tears threatening. And if it doesn't work, then at least you'll know you tried everything, and I'll know I helped the right person for the right reasons. Patricia cleared her throat impatiently. This is all very touching, but I need an answer. My company won't wait much longer. Sarah looked at Emma, who had been scribbling notes throughout the entire conversation. What would you do? Emma stopped writing. Me? I'd be terrified, but I'd also be wondering for the rest of my life what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, she saw Jake watching her with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror. Okay, she said quietly. I'll try the treatment. The next 6 months passed in a blur of early morning herb preparations, carefully monitored meals, and a level of self-care Sarah had never experienced. Jake was patient and thorough, explaining each step of his grandmother's process while giving Sarah the space she needed to process the massive changes in her life. The first month was the hardest. Sarah's body rebelled against the unfamiliar herbs, and she spent most days nauseated and exhausted. Jake brought her ginger tea and sat with her during the worst moments, never pressuring her to continue, but making it clear he believed in her strength. By the second month, something shifted. Sarah began sleeping better than she had in years. Her chronic back pain, which she'd attributed to years of physical work, began to fade. She felt more energetic, more alive than she could remember feeling. Patricia visited once a month as agreed, but her impatience was obvious. The corporate timeline was being disrupted by Sarah's slow progress, and other executives were pressuring Patricia to move forward with land acquisition regardless of the treatment's outcome. It was during the 4th month that Sarah began to suspect something had changed. She was 2 weeks late, which wasn't unusual given her irregular cycles, but something felt different. She found herself avoiding coffee, not because the treatment required it, but because the smell made her queasy. She waited another week before taking the test, afraid to hope. When the second line appeared, faint but unmistakable, Sarah sank to her bathroom floor and sobbed. Jake found her there 20 minutes later, called by some instinct that brought him to her door at exactly the right moment. Sarah, what's wrong? She held up the pregnancy test with shaking hands. Jake went very still, his eyes fixed on the plastic stick, as if it might disappear if he looked away. Is that positive? For a moment they just stared at each other, the magnitude of what had happened settling between them like a living thing. "How do you feel?" Jake asked softly. "Terrified, amazed, grateful, completely overwhelmed." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Jake, what have we done? We've proved that sometimes impossible things become possible when the right people refuse to give up." But even as Jake held her, Sarah realized their struggles were just beginning. Patricia's company wouldn't give up easily, and pregnancy was only the first step in a much longer journey. The next 5 months brought challenges Sarah hadn't anticipated. The national media picked up Emma's story, and suddenly Jake's ranch became a pilgrimage site for desperate women seeking miracle cures. Patricia's company hired teams of lawyers to challenge Jake's property rights, claiming the herbal treatments posed public health risks. Most difficult of all was navigating her changing relationship with Jake. As her pregnancy progressed, their initial connection deepened into something more complex and frightening. Sarah found herself falling in love with a man whose life was under constant attack, while carrying a baby that had become a symbol for battles she'd never wanted to fight. The birth came on a snowy February morning, 3 weeks early but without complications. Sarah held her daughter for the first time as dawn broke over the mountains, feeling a completeness she'd never imagined possible. Jake was there, having never left her side through 18 hours of labor. When he looked at the baby, Sarah saw tears in his eyes that matched her own. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's everything," Sarah replied. Patricia arrived at the hospital that afternoon, flanked by lawyers and carrying a briefcase full of contracts. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. "I trust you're ready to honor our agreement." Sarah, exhausted but fiercely protective, looked up from her nursing daughter. The agreement was that if the treatment worked, we'd negotiate in good faith. It worked. Now, we negotiate. "Actually," Jake said, appearing in the doorway, "there's been a change of plans." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "What kind of change?" "The kind where we don't need your company anymore." Jake smiled and held up a folder thick with documents. "Turns out when you save someone's life, they remember it. 14 women whose lives were changed by my grandmother's treatments just donated enough money to establish an independent research foundation. Sarah will head the medical advisory board, I'll oversee traditional practices, and Emma will handle media relations." Patricia's face went white. "You can't do that, we have contracts. We have an agreement to negotiate. We're negotiating, our answer is no." Sarah watched Patricia realize that her company's leverage had evaporated. The herbs were still exclusive to Jake's property, but now they had independent funding and public support. "This isn't over," Patricia said quietly. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "We're going to help women have babies. We're going to honor traditional knowledge. And we're going to do it without destroying communities or turning healing into corporate profit." After Patricia left, Jake sat beside Sarah's hospital bed, gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked. "I'm thinking my grandmother would be proud, and I'm thinking I love you both more than I ever thought possible." Sarah felt her heart skip. They'd been through so much together, but this was the first time Jake had said the words directly. "I love you too," she whispered. "Both of you. Even though I complicated everything? Especially because you complicated everything. Easy love isn't worth having." Jake leaned down and kissed her forehead. "So what happens now?" Sarah looked at her daughter, then out the window at the mountains where Jake's grandmother had first discovered the healing herbs that changed everything. "Now we begin," she said simply. "We help other women, we protect this land, we raise this baby, and we prove that some miracles are worth fighting for." Outside, snow continued to fall on the valley that held their future, covering the earth where ancient wisdom had taken root and flourished, promising renewal for all who were brave enough to believe in impossible things. 3 years later, the Sarah Mitchell Foundation had helped 47 women conceive using traditional herbal treatments combined with modern medical monitoring. Jake's ranch had become a center for integrated fertility research, and their daughter Emma Rose had become the heart of a community that chose cooperation over corporate conquest. Sarah still marveled sometimes at how much her life had changed from that stormy night when Jake first offered her hope. But as she watched her toddler chase butterflies through the herb garden where miracles grew, she knew that sometimes the most impossible dreams were the ones most worth pursuing. And in the evening quiet of the valley, She could almost hear Jake's grandmother whispering approval on the wind, her ancient wisdom finally finding the recognition it deserved in a world that had almost forgotten how to believe in the power of impossible things.